Revenge with Karen.
Let me guess, Karen said flatly, setting her coffee down with a quiet thunk. You deleted the client's invoice batch because it looked messy in the folder. Across the desk, the new hire, some intern-turned-junior analyst with a LinkedIn bio longer than his employment history, blinked like a deer in a compliance seminar. I thought it was just duplicates, he mumbled. Karen stared at him for a beat, long enough for the silence to congeal into something uncomfortable, and stood up, pulled a printed checklist from her drawer, and slid it across the desk. Next time you think something's a duplicate, check the invoice number, not the font size. She walked away before he could respond, grabbing her ancient, rattling thermos from her desk, paint chipped, dented from years of being dropped beside malfunctioning printers and passive-aggressive post-it notes. It was Tuesday, which meant marketing would forget to update the sales deck again. Max would come sauntering in around 10:40 with a smoothie, sunglasses still on, pretending to have been on calls all morning. The man hadn't seen a calendar invite in months. But Karen was the one who knew which clients were about to churn before they said a word, who could smell a missed KPI from a mile away. She didn't posture, didn't oversell, didn't give PowerPoint pep talks. She just got the damn work done. And until recently, that had been enough. Founder Alan used to call her the engine. She liked that. Not the rock or the glue or whatever other HR memo nonsense people used. The engine. Quiet, powerful, necessary. She'd been there 12 years. Outlasted 5 COOs, 2 rebrands, and 1 internal scandal involving a drone, a misrouted shipment of ergonomic chairs, and an ex-employee's OnlyFans. And now she felt it, something shifting. Not a full earthquake, or like hairline cracks in drywall that appear overnight. Max was being groomed for something. The meetings were smaller, quieter. Her name stopped showing up in agendas. Emails that used to CC her no longer did. And his niece had started shadowing the strategy team, though oddly, only when Karen wasn't around. That morning, as she settled into her desk, third cubicle from the left, the one with the potted snake plant and the sticky drawer, she pulled up her calendar and found her 11 a.m. presentation had been updated. Topic: Quarterly Client Growth Trends. Presenter, Karen A. Updated to Maxwell R. Moderator, Hannah R. Guest presenter, Karen stared at it. No email, no Slack, no heads up, just deleted, like the invoice batch. Now, before we dive any deeper into what happened next, if you're one of the 95% of people who listen to these office revenge sagas without subscribing, do us a solid. Tap that follow button and throw a like if this story's already got your blood pressure spiking. It keeps this channel running smoother than Max's poor intern trying to find a lost PDF during a board meeting. Back to Karen, who, at that moment, was calmly updating her deck anyway. Because when you're the engine, don't stop mid-track just because someone else thinks they're steering. You finish what you start. At 10:52, Max swaggered in, late as usual, gum popping. Hey Karen, he called, not even slowing down, we've restructured the flow a little. My niece is going to walk through the strategy section. Should be more vibrant. Karen blinked once. She doesn't have access to the client reports. He grinned. No worries, I had it pull you from the folder last night. She's got it now. That moment, that was when it shifted from hairline cracks to visible damage, because Karen didn't reply. She just looked back at her screen, saved her slide deck, and slowly closed the laptop. Not slamming it, not storming out, just closed it, soft click, done. At 11 o'clock sharp, the quarterly all-hands kicked off. Karen's camera was off. Her name still showed up in the participant list for now. But as Max launched into his intro, using phrases like pivoting client synergy and next-gen optimization, Karen's eyes stayed fixed on the screen. Then it happened. Before we dig into Q4 retention, Max said, voice syrupy, I want to spotlight some exciting next-gen leadership stepping up. My niece, Hannah, will be walking us through a bold new approach to strategy. Big hand, everyone. Karen's mic unmuted for half a second, then cut. Someone had done it manually. She watched her own voice icon blink red, muted like a stoplight she couldn't control. And then Hannah's camera popped on. Waving, smiling, background blurred, wearing a blazer 2 sizes too big and an expression like this was a school talent show, and she was here to recite client churn metrics like a poem. Karen didn't speak, didn't blink. She hit leave meeting. Then she sat in the silence of her cubicle, blinking at her snake plant, her heart not racing, just flatlining, not grief, not rage, just quiet. But inside, something shifted, something very old. She didn't know it yet, but Clause 14 had just woken up. Let's be honest, Max chuckled into the mic, lounging back like he was hosting a game show and not a quarterly meeting. Some of us didn't quite hit the mark this time. Isn't that right, Karen? The air in the call turned thick. The kind of silence that makes you sweat behind the knees. Few cameras clicked off. One brave soul unmuted just long enough to cough. Karen didn't flinch. Her slide deck was up. Charts clean, projections tight. Not flashy, never flashy, but solid. She triple-checked the numbers last night while reheating soup and trying to forget the Slack message from HR that said Max would be leading Q4 initiatives moving forward. Then came the final nail. "You missed your targets, sweetheart," Max said, voice honey-dipped poison. "It's okay. My niece is taking over." And then, click, muted her mic, her voice. Gone, her name was still on screen, hanging like an obituary. The slide behind Max shifted, not hers, not the one she'd worked on during a power outage last weekend, squinting by flashlight while the storm killed her Wi-Fi, but a new one. Purple font. Comic Sans, clip art, her replacement. Hannah, who once asked if retention meant clients were in jail. Hannah spent 2 days observing Karen's workflow and walked away claiming her vibe was too serious. Hannah, who was currently waving at 43 employees like she'd just won a teen pageant instead of knifing someone mid-presentation. Karen didn't log off immediately. She sat, let it wash over her, face blank, not a single twitch. Her fingers hovered over the trackpad, still resting on the edge of the keyboard like they were waiting for permission. She remembered something then. Years ago, Alan, the founder, walking her through their first ever client churn analysis. She was still new, still green back when her shoes squeaked and she said circle back unironically. "You know the most dangerous person in the room, Karen?" Alan had asked. She'd guessed wrong, twice. He smiled, leaned in, and tapped her desk once. "The one who doesn't speak." Karen clicked leave. Just like that, she was out. No goodbye, no Slack reaction, no dramatic monologue about being silenced or sidelined. Just gone. The Zoom window vanished, and she was back in her cubicle, the faint hum of the ceiling vent now louder than Max's voice had been. For one disorienting moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Like the walls had shifted slightly, like reality was warping in slow motion. That moment where your dignity doesn't scream, it just steps aside quietly and lets the door hit it. Then came the texts. "WTF was that? Are you okay? This feels like a lawsuit." Karen, that was insane. She didn't respond to any of them. She stared at her inbox instead, watching Max's smug follow-up arrive like a thrown drink in a cheap bar. Subject, new era rocket body. "Thanks to everyone who joined today's call. Big things ahead. Shout out to Hannah for bringing fresh energy and clarity to our direction. #NextGen leadership clarity." She laughed once, dry and quiet. Clarity was her client deliverables color-coded by revenue stream, not a buzzword slapped on a PowerPoint Hannah probably paid a Fiverr guy to animate. Karen opened a new document, blank page. She hovered over the resignation template she'd saved 6 months ago when they tried to move her desk next to the copier. Her cursor blinked. She started typing, "Dear Max and HR." After careful consideration, she stopped. Deleted the line, not because she was staying, but because something didn't sit right. Her numbers hadn't missed the target, not really. Retention was within 1.2% of forecast. That wasn't failure, that was precision during a market downturn. And she remembered running that final report. Something about the margins didn't match Hannah's revised slide. One of the charts was off. Fonts didn't match. Timestamp was wrong. Then a second memory came clawing back. PDF buried deep in the compliance archive, something she'd worked on with Alan after that vendor corruption scandal. A protocol they built together after a board member tried to sneak in a cousin under an alias. Alan had named it after an inside joke. Clause 14. Her eyes flicked toward the corner of her screen, to the desktop folder labeled Operations Compliance, Legacy. She hadn't opened it in years. She double-clicked. Inside, old PDFs, training logs, escalation flowcharts. And there, buried under a file titled Ethics Audit Scenarios 2017, was a document marked Clause 14 Direct Conflict Reporting. Her breath slowed. Clause 14 wasn't just a memo, it was policy. And policy, unlike nepotism, had teeth. She leaned back, stared at the ceiling tiles, and whispered to herself, "Let's see how clear things get now." The first night, she didn't sleep. Karen sat at her kitchen table, one with one leg slightly shorter than the others, so every time she shifted her weight, her coffee sloshed like a warning. Her laptop sat open, casting a pale glow across unopened mail and a half-eaten banana she couldn't remember peeling. Her inbox was flooded with whispers. "Are you okay? Did you quit? Was that even legal? One message from Ron in compliance stood out more than the rest. It simply read, Clause 14, was that ever repealed? She stared at those words like they were a riddle. Clause 14, that old skeleton. The clause Alan had insisted on back when they discovered a VP hiring his stepson under a fake last name to dodge nepotism flags. They'd built it quietly, almost theatrically, and buried it in the compliance policy with a signature flourish. If a manager hired a family member without disclosure, it triggered an immediate board-level review, a suspension of that manager's administrative privileges. It was designed as a nuclear option, a break glass in case of moron clause. And Max had shattered the whole damn window. But still, Karen didn't move. Not yet. Instead, she clicked back into her draft resignation letter, the one she'd started composing on the car ride home in her head. The one that began with, after 12 years of dedicated service, and ended with, I wish the company all the best moving forward. Bullshit. She didn't wish them anything. Not yet. Still, walking away felt easier. Cleaner. There was something seductive about vanishing quietly. She could take a few months, work freelance. Maybe take up that weird consulting job Randy kept offering, something with supply chain audits in Napa, wine and spreadsheets. But even as she typed the closing line, regards, Karen, something kept itching behind her ribs. Detail she couldn't shake. It was Hannah's slide. Something was wrong with the damn slide. The numbers were too round, not just close to estimates, identical. Forecasts don't behave like that. They squirm. They resist neatness. And her original report had a 3.7% variance due to Q3 supplier issues. There's no way Hannah's graph should have read exactly 18.00%. Karen pulled up the video recording of the all-hands, scrubbed to the moment Hannah shared screen, froze it there, bottom right corner. Timestamp metadata, last edited 6:42 a.m. Editor MR, Maxwell R. Karen exhaled slowly through her nose. He hadn't just muted her. He'd edited her slides, replaced her data, set her up to look like she missed her targets so he could swap her out for his niece under the cover of performance. Clause 14 didn't just apply. It screamed. Even with that weight in her chest, she didn't call HR. Not yet. She didn't forward the file. She didn't launch any torpedoes. Instead, she stood, walked to her living room, turned off the overhead light, and let herself melt into the couch. The ceiling fan spun above her like it didn't care. She stared at it until her eyes watered. Then she did something she hadn't done in years. She reached for the dusty binder on the lowest shelf of her bookcase, old compliance training notes. The one she made during the chaos years, when Alan still trusted her to build structure out of ego and chaos. When she'd taken detailed notes on every policy she'd helped write, just in case. Clause 14 was there, flagged with a sticky note that read in case the rats come back. She smiled at that. Karen flipped through it slowly, rereading her own handwriting like she was piecing together an alibi. Clause 14. In the event of an undisclosed hire of a relative, the act constitutes a conflict of interest. Upon submission of formal internal escalation, administrative authority is revoked until reviewed by board counsel. HR must remain neutral until review is complete. Translation, Max wasn't just slimy. He was on borrowed time. Still, the idea of going back, of fighting this, felt like drinking warm soda after a funeral. Flat. Wrong. Exhausting, she opened a blank email, addressed it to compliance, then hovered her mouse over the attach file button, paused, closed it again, back to the couch. She needed one more night, not because she doubted the policy or the evidence or even the motive, but because she knew once she pulled that trigger, there was no way to walk it back. Karen didn't want justice, not in the fairy tale sense. She wanted exposure. And maybe, just maybe, a little fear in Max's eyes, just enough to make him remember who trained the person he tried to erase. Just enough to remind him who built the system he thought he could game. So she waited, plotted, and somewhere between her third yawn and the old lamp flickering out beside her, Karen realized she wasn't resigning. Not yet. She had one last item to check first, and it was about to change everything. The office VPN still remembered her password. Karen watched the loading wheel spin like it was making a decision on her behalf. Then, click, access granted, just like that. Her name hadn't been scrubbed yet. No revoked permissions, no admin purge, a small mercy or a dumb oversight. Either way, she was in. It was 1:14 a.m. The only light in the apartment came from her laptop and the tiny red LED on her coffee maker, which hadn't brewed anything in hours. She hadn't changed into pajamas, and even removed her shoes. She sat cross-legged on the couch, hair tied in the loose, crooked bun that always happened when she got serious. She opened the internal HR portal and went straight to the employee database. Search Hannah R., the niece, the fresh energy. The intern turned guest presenter whose idea of strategy was a Canva subscription and a Pinterest board of girlboss quotes. Her file came up quickly, clean, recent, polished. She scanned it like a surgeon. Background check, standard. Onboarding completed, check. Manager, Maxwell R. Internal reference, N/a conflict of interest declaration, blank, blank. Karen clicked again, refreshed, still blank. No relation declared, no disclosure, no disclaimer, no in accordance with Clause X language. Nothing to indicate Max and Hannah were anything more than colleagues. Which, according to every conversation Max had this week, they most certainly were not. Opened a second tab, pulled up the compliance portal. Clause 14 lived there, still active, still binding, still the same trigger mechanism, one formal internal submission containing a verified conflict of interest, signed by the observing party, routed to compliance, and copied to the board. It didn't guarantee removal, but it froze authority, suspended decision rights, escalated the issue above HR and straight to governance. It had only been used once before, in 2018, on a sales director who tried to promote her fiancé during a merger. That director lasted 2 days after the trigger. Nobody talked about it much. Nobody forgot either. Karen opened a new report form. Date, autofilled. Time, 1:27 a.m. Subject, undisclosed familial hire, R. Hannah manager, R. Maxwell attached evidence. She dragged the PDF over. The onboarding file, screen captured and timestamped. She also included the board meeting recording from earlier that day, clipped precisely to the moment Max said my niece. No interpretation required. She paused over the signature box. Employee name, her fingers hovered. This was it, not revenge, not some dramatic storm the castle gesture. This was paperwork, policy, math. She typed. Karen M. Ashford. Then came the final checkbox. It sat at the bottom of the page, surrounded by legalese. Trigger automatic board escalation per Clause 14, pending verification. She clicked it. The box turned blue, submitted. The screen blinked once, then returned to the dashboard. That was it. No confetti, no confirmation email, no one banging a gong in her honor. Just silence, cold, sterile silence. She closed the browser. Her hands didn't shake. She wasn't smiling. There was no rush of adrenaline, no thrill. Just a strange calm. The moments after a storm when all the trees still look like they're listening. On her phone, a new Slack message lit up. From Cindy in HR. Cindy R. Hey, just checking. Did you leave the call earlier because of tech issues? Max said there was a glitch. Karen didn't respond. She plugged her phone into the charger, laid it face down on the counter, and walked to her bedroom. The covers were still unmade. She hadn't touched the bed in over 36 hours. She pulled back the sheets and slid under them, still dressed. As she stared at the ceiling, her mind scanned the possible outcomes. Max could retaliate, try to spin it, claim it was an honest mistake, maybe even try to bury the report under bureaucracy. But the thing about Clause 14, it didn't rely on HR. It bypassed HR. It went directly to the people who signed the paychecks. And while Max might be the nephew, the founder was still the founder. If Alan saw that file, Karen let her eyes close. There was nothing left to do now. No confrontation to script, no monologue to deliver, no audience to perform for. Just wait. Let the machine she helped build do what it was meant to do. Quietly, precisely, like a system with teeth. The next morning, she didn't wear black like in the movies. Karen wore her usual faded navy blazer, one with the ink stain on the cuff from a busted pen during last year's strategy summit. She parked in her usual spot, took the elevator like it was any other Thursday. Her keycard still beeped green at the scanner. Nobody noticed her come in, which was almost funny. 12 years, and she could still move through this place like background noise, like furniture. Her desk was untouched. She sat, turned on her monitor, opened her inbox. Flood of emails about Q4 client transitions, updated process docs, a newsletter from HR titled Leading with Empathy in Times of Change. That one made her laugh, quietly, with teeth. Then came the Slack ping. Maxwell R. Company announcements. Party popper. Next Gen leadership begins today. Collision. Let's welcome Hannah to her new role as strategy lead. Big things ahead. Fresh eyes. Fresh energy. let's do this. Rocket heart emojis rolled in like ants. A few people responded with GIF reactions, The Rock raising an eyebrow, opera clapping. Someone dropped a random photo of a puppy in a bow tie. Karen stared at the message for a long time, not because of what it said, but because of what it didn't. No mention of her departure. No thank you, not even a wishing Karen well on her next journey. She hadn't even been publicly ghosted, she'd been erased. There was no scene, no final showdown, no applause as she packed her mug and her files. The department manager walked by and said nothing. HR, when she passed them in the hallway, smiled like everything was fine. One of them even nodded like they'd just bumped into her in line for a latte. She didn't carry a box of things. Just her thermos, her old notebook, and the snake plant from her cubicle, which drooped slightly, as if it knew. The walk to the parking lot felt longer than usual. At the far end of the lot, she paused, turned to look back at the office one last time. Nothing dramatic. No internal monologue about legacies or lost time. Just a hollow, fluorescent-lit building that would chew up the next version of her just like it chewed up the last. But something else was there now. An undertow, she could feel it. The system had been triggered. The escalation had been submitted. Clause 14 was no longer a hypothetical. It was active, alive, doing its work quietly in the guts of the machine. That board-level email would be hitting inboxes right about now. Legal would see it. Governance would see it. Alan, wherever he was this week, would see it. Karen didn't know how long it would take, but she knew the pressure had been applied. And pressure, she'd learned, didn't scream. It built. She got in her car, pulled out of the lot. No music, no radio, just the quiet hum of tires and old thoughts. Flicker of memory. Alan handing her a sticky note during a late-night compliance meeting years ago. On it, he'd written, "They always forget who wrote the rules." She'd stuck it inside her notebook and never mentioned it again. Back at home, she dropped the snake plant on the windowsill, grabbed the last half of a sandwich from the fridge, and sat cross-legged on the floor. Her laptop chimed once. A single notification from the internal compliance system. Submission acknowledged. To review, she shut the screen. Let it cook. The trick now was not to poke it, not to push too hard. Let the process unfold on its own, like a gas leak waiting for a match. Because Max could dance all he wanted on Slack. But somewhere in the background, lawyers were clearing their calendars. And somewhere in the board's inbox sat a line with her name on it, and a checkbox ticked blue. Karen smiled for the first time in 48 hours. The kind of smile that never reaches the eyes, just sharp enough to taste. The boardroom smelled like coffee and bad decisions. Alan, the founder, the man whose name still sat on the lobby plaque in etched brass, walked in wearing the same beige windbreaker he always had during the early years. Like he'd just come from fishing, not from a private equity negotiation in Boston. His gait was slower than it used to be, but his eyes still scanned like radar. Sharp, suspicious, looking for something out of place. Wasn't supposed to be back until next week. But Alan had a habit of showing up when the math stopped adding up. He paused by the glass conference wall and looked out over the open plan floor. Staff heads down, headphones in, Slack emojis still fluttering from Max's next-gen announcement earlier that morning. The new welcome banner hung over reception like a bad prom decoration. Let's disrupt the future. Alan's eyes narrowed. He leaned slightly to the left. Karen's desk. Third from the left, snake plant gone, coffee mug missing, was empty. He turned to Max, who was busy trying to sync his MacBook to the conference screen. "Where's Karen?" Alan asked casually, but with that old bullet-under-the-pillow edge to his tone. Max didn't look up, just smirked, still fiddling with HDMI inputs. "Replaced her. We're refreshing strategy. Hannah's leading now." Silence. Long enough for people in the hallway to start glancing into the room. Long enough for Cindy in HR to visibly freeze while walking by with her yogurt cup. Alan stepped into the room fully. "Replaced her with who?" he asked, already knowing. Max finally looked up, casual as a cat on a windowsill. "My niece. She's sharp, younger, speaks fluent Gen Z or whatever. Clients love her energy." Alan blinked once. The smirk on Max's face faltered, just slightly. "You replaced Karen Ashford," Alan said slowly, "with your niece." "Yeah, it was time." Karen wasn't scaling. Alan's hand twitched, like he was fighting the urge to throw something, or maybe press a detonator. "What about clause 14? He asked quietly. Max's brows knit together. "What clause?" 14, Alan repeated. "The conflict clause. You were required to file a declaration of relationship before hiring or promoting a family member into a strategic role. That clause was created after Doug tried to install his wife as controller." Max's mouth opened, Closed. I didn't think that was still active. It's never been deactivated. I mean, yeah, but nobody actually enforces that. Alan didn't respond. Just looked at him, not like a disappointed uncle, like a man who just found a dead fish in his pool. Karen, meanwhile, was watching all of this unfold from her kitchen counter. Laptop open. Webcam feed running from the security camera pointed at the boardroom, something she helped set up years ago during a client audit. The IT guy had never changed her credentials. He probably never thought to. She watched Alan's face shift, neutral, then blank, then something else. Pale, heavy. Then came the line. "My God," Alan said softly. "What have you done?" Max tried to recover. "Come on, it's not a big deal." Karen was already pulling back. "We're moving forward. This is evolution." Alan stared through him. "Is that what you think this is?" he asked. "It's dry and deadly." "Evolution?" Nobody answered. A conference phone on the table buzzed. Legal was calling in. Max reached for it, but Alan stopped him with a look, that kind of look that could stun a room into silence without raising its voice. Alan turned to Cindy in HR, who hadn't moved a muscle since the bomb dropped. "Did you sign off on this?" She swallowed. I didn't know she was related." He said she was a referral. Alan's voice dipped lower. "You didn't know. You signed it." "I assumed the compliance step had already, you assumed." It wasn't a question. It was a guillotine. Karen sat back in her chair, arms folded, sipping lukewarm coffee. She didn't need to be in the room. She didn't need to say a word. Her work was done the second she ticked the escalation box. This part, the unraveling, that belonged to them. Let them flail. Let Max explain how his definition of leadership involved doctoring slide decks and hiring his niece to deliver text-level fluff, while the real strategist sat in silence, watching her own numbers get replaced. On the boardroom camera, Alan stepped closer to the table. He picked up a printed agenda for the meeting, flipped it over, scribbled something with a pen from his jacket pocket, then slid it toward Max. Screen caught it just before the paper went out of frame. Board review. Emergency session. Conflict clause breach. Karen smiled, not out of pettiness, out of precision. This was exactly how it was designed to work. Quiet trigger. Loud consequences. The projector flickered to life like an omen. Dust floated through the beam, catching in the artificial light, as the screen filled with a single phrase in bold black letters. Clause 14. Undeclared familial conflict underneath it, the company letterhead. Time-stamped. Formal, no spin, no emoji, just policy, cold and sharp. The emergency meeting had been called just 2 hours after Alan's return. No warning, no prep. Compliance officers filed in first, all wearing that same tight-lipped expression, half duty, half dread. Legal came next, led by Cassandra Pierce, who hadn't been seen in office since 2020 and had once made a regional director cry by reading a contract out loud without blinking. Max came in last. No tie, sleeves rolled, sweat already darkening the back of his collar. He sat at the end of the table where Alan usually sat, bold move, and pretended it wasn't intentional. Karen wasn't there, but her presence was everywhere. On the report packet in front of every chair, the login metadata from Hannah's onboarding. In the clause citation blinking on the screen like a heartbeat. Someone had printed Karen's escalation submission and slid it into a binder labeled immediate action. Max didn't even glance at it. Instead, he leaned forward and opened with a grin that no one returned. "Look, I get it. Mistakes were made. But let's not blow this out of proportion." Cassandra raised an eyebrow. Alan said nothing. Max kept going. "Hannah's qualified. She's got fresh vision. The org needs to evolve, right?" Karen was great, sure, but she was stuck in legacy mode. "This is about direction, not drama." No one moved. Then Cassandra clicked her pen. "In your onboarding paperwork," she said calmly, "you certified that Hannah R. was a general referral. You checked the box that read, no familial relation to the hiring manager or any person in a position of influence. You signed this, dated it. You signed it again on system verification." Max shifted in his chair. "Okay, sure, but it's not like she's immediate family. She's your blood niece," Cassandra said. "That qualifies." He scoffed. "It's not like I'm sleeping with her." Someone coughed, loud, awkward, shocked. Alan's hand twitched again. Cassandra didn't blink. "That's not the bar. This clause doesn't cover just romantic entanglements. It exists to prevent structural bias." She just confirmed in front of 4 compliance officers, 2 lawyers, and the founder himself. Max's jaw flexed. "This is a witch hunt." "No," Cassandra said, eyes like glass. "This is a protocol you helped violate." Quietly, repeatedly. And now you're trying to downplay it because the person you replaced happened to remember the rules you forgot. Max turned toward Alan. That's when the silence got heavy. Alan had said nothing the entire meeting. He just sat there, fingers steepled, eyes on the center of the table like he was watching a ghost crawl out of the wood grain. Finally, he spoke. This, he said slowly, is exactly what I feared when I stepped back. The room exhaled as if it had been holding its breath for 15 minutes. Alan leaned forward, voice still low. I built this place during a recession. I poured my savings into payroll. I slept on a cot in the server room for 2 years. And when we finally stabilized, I promised myself we'd never rot from the inside out, that if we grew, we'd grow clean, transparent, accountable. He gestured to the screen. This clause wasn't symbolic, it wasn't fluff, it was the anchor, and now it's the noose. Max shifted again. It's not like I embezzled funds. You did worse, Alan said. You broke trust. He turned to Cassandra. What's the process from here? Cassandra clicked to the next slide. Immediate suspension of managerial privileges. Freeze on decision rights pending full review. Third-party audit. Board vote. Possible termination. Max blanched. Termination? You're going to fire me over a paperwork screw-up? Cassandra smiled thinly. We fired people for less. Alan stood slowly. This meeting's adjourned. Cassandra gathered her files. Compliance followed her out. HR didn't say a word. They just looked hollow, like people who'd bet on the wrong horse and knew it. Max sat there, alone now, projector still casting Clause 14 across his chest like a brand. Alan didn't look back. Outside the building, a fall breeze kicked up paper leaves in the courtyard. And across town, Karen stood in line at a pharmacy, picking up toothpaste and allergy meds, unaware of the precise moment when her integrity split the firm in two. Or maybe she was aware. Because as she stepped outside, her phone vibrated with a single notification. Board escalation in motion. Clause 14 breach confirmed. She didn't smile, didn't celebrate. She just exhaled, slow and deep. The house was cracking, and she had simply pulled the first brick. The email came on a Tuesday. Subject line, Governance Review Update. Clause 14 escalation outcome. Karen didn't open it right away. She saw the preview on her lock screen as she poured herself another mug of burnt office-grade coffee, still buying the same brand out of habit, even though the job that demanded it no longer owned her mornings. She finished rinsing a plate, wiped her hands on a dish towel, and let the email wait. She'd earned that right. Eventually, she clicked it open. Dear Miss Ashford, we would like to formally acknowledge that your submitted concern regarding an undeclared conflict of interest has resulted in a full governance review. We appreciate your continued commitment to ethical practices and organizational transparency. As part of our response, we are initiating structural changes to our hiring and oversight protocols. Effective immediately, the former acting strategy lead has been removed from his operational role, pending further board proceedings. Additionally, are extending an offer to you. Title: Interim Director of Strategic Operations Compensation, plus 15% above previous salary tier term. 6 months with pathway to permanent role. We believe your leadership will be invaluable in guiding this transition period. Sincerely, Cindy R., head of HR. Karen stared at the screen for a moment, then blinked. No fireworks, no apologies, just language dipped in legally vetted civility. Kind of email designed to clean up a mess without admitting one existed. She appreciated the irony. She'd been erased in silence, and now they were trying to reattach her with the same surgical tone. She sipped her coffee, let it sit bitter on her tongue, and clicked reply. Hi Cindy, thanks for the update. I appreciate the offer, and I'm glad to hear the governance protocols are being taken seriously. That said, I won't be returning. However, I'd like to recommend someone who I believe could lead your transition efforts with intelligence, ethics, and a whole lot of backbone. Please find attached the resume of Nia Patel. She interned under me during the 2020 cycle. She's sharp, measured, and understands both strategic pressure and cultural empathy. If you're truly committed to turning the page, she'll help you write the next one properly. Regards, Karen Ashford. She hit send. Then she closed her laptop. Outside, wind was finally shifting, trees flexing in that slow, invisible way they do before real weather arrives. She stood on her porch for a long while, thermos in hand, staring out at the cul-de-sac. Same houses, same fences, but something inside her had moved, clicked into place. She wasn't angry. She wasn't triumphant. She was done. Not in the washed-up way Max had probably hoped for, but in the clean, finished sense. Kind of done that comes after you've told the truth in the only language power understands: receipts, timing, and the right damn clause. Her phone buzzed again, this time a message from Nia. Holy SHT, they called me. Also, did you know your name's still on the org chart under Architect, Strategic Protocol? I asked. They said they never took it off. Karen laughed out loud, short, bright, surprised herself. She thought about replying with something serious, something mentor-like. But instead she typed, good, let it haunt them. Then she set her phone down, made herself some lunch, and opened a different email entirely, one from a boutique consultancy firm out of Chicago. They were expanding, looking for someone to help scale their retention framework without sacrificing ethics. She didn't even need to rewrite her resume. Her work had already spoken. The notification passed like a ghost. No banner, no statement, just a subtle update on LinkedIn, visible only if you looked close enough. Maxwell R., no longer with the company. No farewell post. No moving on to exciting new opportunities. Just a silent decapitation, clean and efficient, like someone finally hit backspace on his career. The niece disappeared too. Her profile quietly pivoted from strategy, lead to open to work, with a fresh canvas-stitched header reading bringing creative spark to business challenges. Few pity likes trickled in from high school acquaintances and ex-roommates still working retail. Karen didn't click anything. She saw the updates while sipping tea on her patio, one foot tucked under her leg, laptop balanced on a throw pillow. An early chill rode the October breeze, crisp enough to remind her she didn't owe anyone warmth anymore, not here, not now. The offer from the rival firm sat open in a second tab. A tidy contract, 6-month retainer, custom title, high autonomy, double what she used to make, plus an option to build out her own team if she stayed past Q2. She hadn't said yes. Not yet, not because she was unsure, because she liked the feeling of choosing, of waiting. There was power in restraint. Her phone buzzed. A Slack DM from someone still inside, someone smart enough not to use work devices for real talk. Did you see? It's real. He's out. Clean sweep. Oh, appeal. Alan's back, sitting in on ops meetings again. People are walking on eggshells. Karen didn't reply, just tapped the phone face down on the table and exhaled slowly through her nose. Alan had always said the rot doesn't start with the collapse. It starts with silence, with that first ignored red flag, that quiet rewriting of boundaries, that just this once exception. Clause 14 wasn't just policy, it was a warning label, one that Max laughed at. And now, how Max had been scrubbed. From payroll, from systems, from narrative. There'd be no biography for him on the company page, no legacy to speak of, just a faint echo in an old boardroom recording, the moment where the founder looked at the smirking mistake of a man and saw, clearly, the thing he'd always feared most: nepotism in the cockpit, arrogance with the controls. Karen reached for her mug, fingers brushing the lip of the ceramic before wrapping around it. Steam curled upward, catching the sunlight. Her desk now was simple. Clean, not corporate, one small potted succulent, a corkboard of client logos she liked, and a single framed image centered just beneath her second monitor. Not a photo of her team, not a trophy or award, a screen capture. Blurry, grainy, low-res, pulled from the boardroom security footage she'd watched from her kitchen counter on the night everything turned. The moment Alan looked across the table at Max, eyes wide, voice like ash, and said, "My God, what have you done?" She hadn't meant to keep it at first, but it grew on her, not as revenge, as proof that silence has a limit, that rules, real ones, matter, that dignity might not always win loudly, but it wins deeply. She never posted about it, never made a thread or gave a text speech or dropped a viral tweet. Her LinkedIn headline still reads strategic consultant / advisor / coffee enthusiast, but inside that tiny frame on her desk sat everything anyone ever needed to know. The man who tried to silence her had been erased by his own echo. And the woman who remembered the rulebook, she didn't gloat. She outlasted. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.